What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. I hope everybody had an awesome weekend, and by the time you're probably about to watch this video, I hope you're about to have another good weekend. But today I've got a 6-liter in the shop that needs an oil cooler replaced. It's leaking around the external O-rings. I'll show you on the top gasket piece, but I'm gonna put you on time lapse, show you some good pointers on how to do that, what needs to be addressed when you take everything apart, and just follow through the video to be a more instructional video. Probably won't do a lot of stuff on time lapse, so it might be a little bit of a longer video, but if you watch this video, it'll show you exactly how to replace the oil cooler in your 6-liter. But thanks, and let's get to it. All right, so as you can see here, we've got a completely assembled 6-liter, and I'm just going to start from the very beginning and show you every single thing, every step that I do. But as you can see, oh yeah, that's from it running maybe 5 minutes or so, just pulling it in the shop to do an oil change when I noticed it. But if you go up in the valley here and look down and just pay attention, you can see it on the side there, just running down a nice steady stream. So we're just going to go ahead, and you probably could, if this was your truck, you could probably go ahead and just pull it out and change the O-rings on it. But more than likely, if they're leaking like that, it probably has a dormant oil cooler in it, and you don't want to run one of those. So I'll show you what fails. 9 times out of 10, it's the O-rings that come with the dormant kits that fail. So, but yeah, let's get to it. Another thing I want to go over in this video, Ford has changed part numbers on these oil coolers. They are no longer buying them from International. They have changed part numbers. This is the part number that you want. Do not buy the new part number. They are just a dormant oil cooler in Ford packaging that you will overpay for, and they will fail. You need to try, if you can, find this part number right here. That's what you're going to want to find when you do this job. If you buy the new one, you know, I'm not guaranteeing that it'll fail, but I know that I've been doing this a long time, and all the dormant coolers that I've ever seen come through the shop are failed, bad O-rings, whatever it may be, and this is what I use. I only put Ford parts in all my fleet trucks, all my personal trucks. You know, when it comes to stuff like this, sensors, anything like that, needs to be Ford parts. And like I said, take a picture, a screenshot of that part number, and when you go to your dealer to get an oil cooler, this is the part number that you're going to want to get. And don't let them try and sell you a new part number one, because you'll be doing the job again. So first thing that I like to start doing when I do this is go ahead and pop your oil filter loose. Let that go ahead and start draining, because your whole housing is going to come off here. And go ahead and get your coolant draining, and we're going to get this Digas bottle out of the way. So you're also going to need to change oil when you get done with this job, oil and coolant. If you can, if you have a Caterpillar dealer near you, I like to, when I do this, I like to go ahead and swap them over to Cat ELC. And it's a red coolant. You can buy 50/50 or pre-diluted. When you drain your coolant, take your cap loose here, let pressure off of it, it'll drain faster. While your coolant's draining, go ahead and get you an 11mm and go ahead and get your charge pipes out the way. When you're doing this, one thing that I prefer to do is only take your clamp loose on your charger, take it loose right there, and down on your intercooler. Don't take these loose right here. We want to keep them as tight a seal as possible. If you take them loose, they're more prone to blow. ahead and leave your clamps on the intercooler, that way you don't lose them. Just push them up on it, just like that. Once your coolant gets done draining, we're going to go ahead and get our biggest bottle out of the way. That way we can get the intake out. As you can see, this one's got a really nice one. We'll go ahead and continue that series because we're going to put an S&B on it. Go ahead and get your clamp loose here. Be very careful when doing this one right here, because if you manhandle this, you will break this nipple off this radiator, and you'll be putting a whole radiator in it. Just grab hold of the hose there with your pliers and just twist side to side. Don't squeeze super hard, and it'll pop right off. Shove it in your bottle. You're going to want to wait on this one till your coolant's completely draining, because it will make a mess. Alright, so next thing I like to do is, you don't have to do this, it just makes your life a little bit easier. Go ahead and pop your radiator hose loose. Take your 8 mils here loose. And get your radiator supports out of the way. Your push clip tool here, panel popper, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Pop that loose. You'll have 2 push clips here for your battery harness, and then 2 on your intercooler support bracket bolts. And what I like to do, push your radiator forward, pull that, set it right here, pull this back, take your radiator support here, put it back on, but this time we're going to cock it sideways here, use this back bolt, and tighten it up to hold it tight. Pulls it back this real far this way, and then we can get this out of the way. I just don't like fighting this, and I pull this secondary shroud. Some of y'all won't have this shroud. A lot of people get rid of them. And just tighten them up. Don't go crazy tight. Just enough to hold it. Once that's out the way, you can push this back, and then take your 8s loose right here, tighten the piss out of one of them. And get this out the way. now we have access to our bolts for our shroud here. You could probably go through here and fight them. It's just a lot easier because a lot of times these are tight. It's a lot easier just to go ahead and pop them loose right there and just not have to fight them. We'll pull this back over here, way it's out the way, like so. And at this point, our coolant's probably drained enough that we can go ahead and get our degas bottle out of the way. That clamp can be a bear. Just don't get angry because that just makes your job harder. Get your degas bottle out. If yours is all dingy like that, I think a new one from Ford is like $120 or something like that. Go get you a new one. Go ahead and take your fine PVC pipe intake and get it out of here. And your unserviced filter from 19.0 dam. You'll more than likely have 2 8s that hold this horn onto the turbo. What I like to do is I'll just pop the 2 10s off the FICM and just leave it with it and then not even fight it. Makes your life a little bit easier in fighting those 8s because you'll need a wrench. Don't lose these. Go ahead and get this out of the way. You'll have a CCV tube that goes into your valve cover here. Don't be too mean with this because it's usually pretty brittle and you'll break it. A lot of times you'll have to this is an early model box. Same concept applies to your late models. You got 2 tabs here. Usually got to manhandle it pretty well. I like to just grab it and pull up really firm and then go back with it and you'll get it out of the way. Also, don't break this. At this point, you can go ahead and get your cold side charge pipe out the way. Sometimes your clamps will be stapled to the pipe, so don't fight it too horribly hard. This one is stapled right there. All right, once that's out the way, we'll go ahead and pop your fan connector loose right there. And then so that one's not bolted. So a lot of times you have 4 bolts that hold the secondary fan shroud on. A lot of times people don't put the bottom ones in. I've never had a problem leaving them out. Just take your 2 top ones loose here. Depending on who put this together last, they'll either be extremely tight or loose. A lot of times they're tighter than balls. Don't lose these, they like to fall out. Like I said, it goes one way or the other, and in this case, they were loose. So now, I'm gonna show you a little trick that a lot of people don't know about on 6 liters. You're going to take your belt and you're gonna pull it as hard as you can this direction. And then if you can do it, if not, you don't have to do it this way. And there is a little tang down there on your tensioner that you're gonna push up when you pull this direction. And it's gonna lock your belt, and you can just take it loose, and you ain't gotta try and shove a breaker bar and all that other junk down there and get mad. So this AC line usually sucks on early models to fight it. I'm trying to do it with the camera in the way here. Pull it as hard as you can. And there it is. Now you can just take your belt loose and you ain't gonna worry about that. Now let's get this alternator out of here. Go ahead, and before you do this and you take that loose, there's a 10 mil on this passenger battery. Take it loose. And then this wire right here, that's got all the insulation on it, runs over to your glow plugs and everything. Just go ahead and take it loose, tuck it out of the way, and we'll hook it back up when we get done with the job. That way you don't have a live wire right here and shock the piss out of yourself. Get that out the way, like so. Just like that. These are 13 mils. Get them out of here. Now, once your alternator's out of there, you'll have an 8mm bolt right there that holds your heater core line to the intake manifold. Go ahead and take it off. what I like to do on this, instead of taking this whole pipe out and fighting it, just take you a pair of pliers and you can just bend that tab up just like that. And then you can just beat it back down when you get the job done. Super easy. Don't overthink it. You'll have your map sensor hose. Take it loose. A lot of times these are split and they will cause problems. So if yours is split, like this one is, change your hose out. You can go to advanced and just get you, forget what size that hose is, but just go get you a spool of it. I think it's like $20. Because if you don't fix that, you can have problems. All right. So at this point, if yours has this, this is an early model thing. If yours has these sensors, go ahead and disconnect them. You'll have one down there. So this is going away. We get rid of these on early models. A lot late models that do have these, if you look in here, there will be no pins. So this actually doesn't operate, but on the early models it does operate, and it will give you problems. It's a flapper in there. Go ahead and get rid of it. You can go to Ford and buy like an 06 horn, and it's just a straight horn. Or if you upgrade to like an S&B, or I like to recommend Larry at SoCal Billet, and get you a nice one piece. Obviously this isn't going to get that because it's a work truck, but you get the idea. You'll have one that's a 10 millimeter, and the rest are 8s. Your 10 millimeter one's going to be long. If you are retaining this, make sure you pay attention to what hole it goes in. Like that. Before you do that, clean your hole off there. We don't want no junk falling down in there. Alright, once you have your top piece off there, you'll have 3 3/16 Allens. Do not be Hercules with these, you will strip them. When you swap over to this, if you do the late model stuff, I don't like to keep the, you can either keep the Allens or you can use you'll have to go find another 8 millimeter about the same size. I don't like to keep the Allens, it's a little bit more difficult. You can get an 8 millimeter wrench in there a lot easier. So that's what I like to do, but go ahead and throw this away. Go ahead and disconnect your EGR valve. And just to get it out of the way, I like to go ahead and disconnect this heater core line. You don't have to, but when you're taking the harness loose, it makes life a little bit easier. If you're fighting one of these hoses that are stuck like that, get you a pair of pliers that aren't super aggressive. These are, but don't squeeze it too tight. Get you a nice grip on it and just do that nice twist motion and get it broke loose. Make your life 1,000 times easier. Take that loose. This thing's already got a messed up funnel there. So get it out the way and then tuck it up on your map sensor. Like so. All right, next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our push pins here loose. You'll have 2 push pins up underneath here that are attached to the harness. Be careful here because this is very brittle. You wanna keep it, I like to just rock them side to side. A lot of times, you know, you're gonna break them regardless, but you know, if you're gentle with it, they won't be too mean to you. Pop them loose, like so. And then you're gonna take this, fold this up over that, and then get you a bungee cord. I'll show you where to hook it. All right, take your bungee cord. It doesn't have to be nothing special. Loop it up underneath that. If yours has one of these shields, just find a good spot to hook it. It don't have to be anything great. You can hook it back here to the windshield wiper, like that. Just anything you can hook it to, make your life easier, and just get that out of the way, because next thing we're gonna pull is turbo. So, disconnect your VGT, like so. Check your pigtail while you're here. A lot of times these are busted. This one's busted. We'll go ahead and get a pigtail for it while we're at Ford. If this has got a bad connection or something, you're gonna be fighting your turbo having problems. These things rely on a lot of sensors. You're gonna have an 8mm bolt down here on your oil cooler housing for your drain, your feed, sorry. Don't lose it. And then you're gonna have, underneath all this fine insulation, you'll have 2 10mm bolts that are tighter than hell. Ooh. Get them out of there. Once that's loose, you can go ahead and rock this. This can make you mad. Just sit here and wiggle it, work at it. It'll come. Just skin your knuckles alive. But what you can do is, if yours has this braided section, I usually like to go ahead and put an updated one. They get rid of this. These things like to blow out, and you lose all your oil. And you know, obviously, you can understand that that's a problem. So, but once that's loose, now we're going to go ahead and get our up pipes loose and our down pipe loose. So if yours starts spinning, reach your hand back here and you'll have there's a little T, they're T-bolts. Don't skin your fingers alive because they will get caught in it. Stick it back in the holder and take that all the way to the very edge of that and bolt. And then do the same for your up pipes. Depending on who has had your truck apart before, will depend on where your up pipe nut is at. So let's see here. Can't see with all this god-awful insulation. Yeah. So you'll have your nut back there. Get your ratchet. That's it. Take it to the very edge there. So, next thing I like to do, you do not have to do it this way that I'm about to show you. It's just the easiest way to do it. You can go and get a pry bar with a striking end on it and a hammer, and you're going to put it right on the edge of this lip and just work your way around it, and it'll eventually pop loose. It's just takes a little bit more time doing it like that. If you have a compressor and an air hammer and a long chisel bit, that's what I prefer to use. Just bump it a couple times and it pops loose. Saves you hours of frustration. So that's what I'm going to show you next. All right. Now you're going to take your air hammer or your pry bar and hammer. Back right there on the turbo housing. Don't go crazy with it. Just like that. That's all she needs. All right. Now on our up pipes, same thing, turbo housing. See, that's a good representation right there of why an air hammer is a lot easier. That one was really seized. If you were using a pry bar and a hammer, you'd have probably been fighting that for a hot minute. So keep that in mind before you tackle this job. Now, you're just going to reach back here, take your T's, pop them out of the clamp, put that one back on your down pipe just until we get turbo out of the way. And then same thing on your up pipes. This one, the T's a little bent, so it's not going to come out. So just take your nut, take it completely off, and then you can just spread your clamp. Sometimes one might be a bear. Yeah. There we go. Just like that. Get it out of the way as much as you can. Actually, what I like to do on your up pipe clamp is don't put them on your up pipes. Try and, if you can, spread it and put it on the hot side housing. That way it comes out with the turbo and you ain't gotta wonder where it was at. That way when you put the charger back in, you're not fighting it. All right, so now we have 3 mounting bolts. One here and one on the other side. And depending on who has had your truck apart, like I said before, you will probably have that last third bolt back here on the turbo housing. And it is a pain. A lot of times I don't put them back in. There's no reason to put them back in. Some people will argue with me on that, but these two right here are plenty with the up pipes and the down pipe holding the turbo that you're not going to run into any problems. So you'll understand why when you're doing this job, if you have that back bolt, you'll understand why we don't put them back in. But I'll show you how to get that one out because this one does have it. All right, so here's the setup that I've got to do this. It makes life easier. Go get you you don't have to go get this. You can do it differently, just whatever you feel comfortable with doing. This is the way that I found to do it the best. This is a wobble 10 millimeter. And if you can, you're gonna wanna probably go get a brand new socket for this because that back bolt does like to round off and then you're in for a world of trouble trying to get it back out because you a lot of times got to cut it out and it's obviously really hard to get back here. I've got a wobble extension as well, and then just a decent sized ratchet. Put it on there, and then I like to go just above the down pipe here to get in there on it. Just like that. One thing I'll also tell you, little pin magnet is your friend on this job. Really any job, but you know what I mean. Just like that. So now you can go ahead and take your 10 mils loose that are on the front. These are a lot easier. And then you can also use this on this one over here. This one's a little bit more tight, so it's harder to get in there as far as the wrench goes. And if it's super tight, a lot of times it can be a pain as well. Like that. At this point, you're ready to pull your charger out. These can also be a pain. Just what I like to do is grab your snout here and just pick up as hard as you can on it. And then just wiggle it back and forth. If your downpipe has a tang on it, go ahead and take that loose. And then just like so. Don't blow your back out doing this. It is heavy. This is what I was talking about leaving your up pipe clamp on the charger, because you don't want to put this turbo back in and you don't have the clamp, so you're pulling your turbo back out. At this point, you can go ahead and pull your drain. You're going to want to get new O-rings for this. You can go to Ford and get you a whole turbo install kit. It'll come with all your O-rings, your feed gaskets, and everything. That's what I like to buy. Comes with new bolts as well. All right, now you're don't have to do it like this, is the way I prefer to do it. 2 adjustables, makes life easier. This one's from Snap-on, it's beveled down. It works pretty good on holding your jam nuts down here. So let's go ahead and pop him loose. Go ahead and get your coolant temp sensor, pop it, get it out of the way. Just like that. Just give it a pop. Then at this point, you want to make sure that you have a zip tie or something on this line just to catch your nut if it decides it wants to fall. That way you're not chasing it. Just like that. Should be a 10mm there, but it's not connected. So you would take your 10mm loose on your intake manifold right there if you had one. All right, now at this point, we're gonna go ahead and get the FICM out of the way. That way we can get our injector harness off of here. Your back ones will be 8mm, and there will be a bracket, so just be careful. Like so. Now you can take this loose, take your clips loose, squeeze on both sides of the connector. Make sure your connectors are good. If these are broke, go ahead and put an injector harness on it, because if those fall out, they'll cause the truck to run bad. All right. Once that's out the way, at this point, we'll probably go ahead and get the injector harness pulled and out of our way. All right, so pulling your injector harness, I like to use just I got my little pocket screwdriver here that I've been using for years, and you're just gonna come down here And your clips, you just want to push them in. Usually got to push them pretty firm. Get them down there, wiggle your connector side to side, and they'll pop loose. Don't break these. You'll have two holders that go on your valve cover studs here. Go ahead and take them loose. All right, once you have all your connectors loose, you'll have a 10mm nut on the back for your ground strap for this. Go ahead and take it loose. A lot of times they don't come loose. You'll have to cut them and splice them because the nut is seized onto the intake manifold. Hopefully we'll get lucky here. We're not getting lucky. Yep, that one ain't gonna happen. So because I'm gonna be putting an injector harness on this truck anyway, I'm just gonna go ahead and not fight it and just go ahead and snip it. Snip it as close to the stud as you can. And now get your injector harness and get it out of here. So at this time, you're gonna wanna go ahead and inspect this harness really well because they like to rub on the intake manifold in a couple different spots and they will cause issues. This is a good example right here. If you look, it's rubbed through all the insulation here and we have some bare wires. So I'm not fighting with that. We'll go ahead and go to Ford and get a new injector harness for it. Clips are broken anyway. So if y'all are like that, just go get an injector harness for it. So now you can start pulling all your different plugs loose. That one's loose. You're gonna have some down here. If your clips are broke, replace your pigtails. Just like that. Now that we have that all loose. So another thing, take your ICP sensor loose and your glow plug plugs loose on your module, because you're gonna pull this whole harness forward and tuck it up where it's out of your way. So once that's all loose, we're gonna reach back here and you're gonna pop your IPR pigtail and get it out of the way. Just like so. You need to be checking all your pigtails as you're pulling them off. You don't want to put any broken pigtails back on this because it'll just give you problems and you'll have to go back in the truck. So it's just easier to address them while you're doing a job this big and just get it taken care of. So another thing I like to do is go ahead and on your driver's side valve cover, go ahead and pop your nut that holds your engine oil dipstick tube on. Just take it loose and take your dipstick loose off there. Gives you just a little bit more wiggle room there. That way you're not fighting that harness so much. You take it, pop it over that dipstick, and at this point, you are pretty much tucked out of the way. Be careful here, don't put these anywhere that you're gonna lay on them and bust them. Just like that. All right, so let's continue on our bowl down here and get it out of the way. Don't forget your zip ties. You want to be very careful with these lines, because if you do not hold that nut that is actually threaded into the bowl and you try taking that line loose and it's scalded onto that actual adapter, you're going to kink that line, and then you're just spending more money and having to go to the parts department more. And that's also going to be a Ford thing. You probably won't be able to find that at a Advanced Auto or wherever. So once all your fuel lines are disconnected here, we're going to go ahead and you're going to get a T45 Torx, an extension, and you're going to have 4 T45s holding this bowl on. I like to, if you're not changing your fuel filter, we've already just changed this one in our last video. If you're not changing your fuel filter, you can just leave it in, but oil filter does have to come out. And then we're gonna take this standpipe loose. So go ahead, get it out the way. You probably make a little bit of a mess when you take this off as far as fuel goes. So do what you gotta do as far as laying some rags down go. All right, so at this point, we're gonna go ahead and take our oil filter standpipe loose. It's gonna be T25 Torx, and I'm gonna show you a trick on it too. All right, so once you got your T25 Torx, we're gonna go ahead and when you're looking at this standpipe, you'll have 3 of these T25 Torx that hold this standpipe in. You're gonna have a, looks like a C elbow. It holds the thermostat and pretty much the oil pressure regulator into this bowl, and your drain back valve, which is over here. And we're gonna pop these 2 just loose. They do not have to come out. So just take it, loosen them up, probably just where they're about finger tight, like so. and you'll notice that they pop up because one of them's a spring. And that's all we're going to do on that. And then we're going to come over here to our back one, and you'll see where there's teeth on a part of the standpipe there that go over to that. This one has to come out completely. Do not drop it or lose it in here, because then you're going to have to sit there and try and find it. Alright, so once you have that out, this one comes completely out. You're going to take his standpipe, you're going to twist it, and you're going to pull it right out, just like that. Make sure you don't lose your O-ring. This does not come with your oil cooler kit. I like to just stuck it back in there and tuck it out the way, just like that. So now at this point, we're going to go ahead and get our intake manifold bolts loose. But a very important step before we do that, we're going to clean this entire area. You're going to block off all your holes into this engine. So your drain valve for your turbo, cover this up if you can. You don't have to go crazy with this because it's about to come out anyway and get cleaned. But pretty much any passageway into the engine, block it off, and we're going to clean this entire valley out. Because what'll happen is if you don't do this, when you pull this intake manifold out, any type of junk, leftover bolts from a previous mechanic that has left them sitting down there, when you pull this off, you have a direct port right into the cylinder head all the way down. And if you don't catch that, a lot of times, you know, people will pull this off, not know what they're doing, stuff will fall down in there, you'll start your engine up, and boom, you've got a bolt that you left down in there, and either it's destroyed a head or it's gone down into the engine and destroyed the engine. So what I like to do is I'm going to get a whole case of brake clean, and I'm going to clean this entire valley out and just let it run down. Get you a pan down there, and let it just catch it down there behind the oil pan. And then we're going to take our air compressor, get it completely filled up, and blow this entire area out. I mean, I'm going to show you. We're going to be sticking it down in all these crevices. I want to make sure nothing is left on this engine in the valley before I pull this intake manifold out. Like I said, because, you know, you could have some serious issues at this point if you're not paying attention. Alright, so now at this point, we've got our compressor all built up, and I'm just going to blow off all the loose standing junk here before we go brake cleaning everything. Once again, make sure you block off all your holes, and then just go to town. Don't be shy. Just get everything out of here. Now we'll go get our brake clean, and we'll start brake cleaning. Don't be shy here. Just spend some time in this area. Like I said, this is probably the most important part of this entire job, because this can be between you buying an engine because you were negligent, or you doing the job correctly. On at least one of your cans, go ahead and put your nozzle in there and just get real good down here in all your crevices and cracks by the intake manifold. Even in here, this is the most important part. Just focus in this area. Just want to make sure we get all the nasty junk and any loose standing things out of this area. All right, once you're good and happy with your brake clean job, get your air hose again and go back at it. All right, another little step I like to take, get you a magnet, a little pin magnet, and just go down in between your intake manifold here and just make sure there's no bolts that have been left over from previous people. And at this point, you can go ahead and take all your tins loose and get your intake manifold out of here. Also forgot to mention, if your truck still has an EGR cooler attached to it, you'll have a 8mm bolt right here. And a lot of times I struggled pretty bad with trying to get the intake manifold out when it still has an EGR cooler. And a lot of times I'll just end up pulling the cooler with it. I mean, it's in the way anyway. So you'll take your V-band loose back there on your up pipe, and I like to try and pull it all out as one. You'll have to get rid of your turbo pedestal as well. But if your truck has a upgraded cooler, go ahead. Take your 2 tins loose that are right here. And then you'll have some hose clamps back here that we're going to take loose. I don't think those are 8s. They might be. Let's see if we get lucky here. Of course not. At this point, you'll take your upgraded cooler and get it out the way. And now we can continue. Down pipe out the way. At this point, you can go ahead and get all your bolts out of the way. Make sure you mark and or pay attention to where all your studs go before you go pulling. All right, now you're going to want to be very careful with this front fuel line, and then we're just going to pick up and pull it forward. And then just like that, it's out. This will be a different process on your very early model 6-liter trucks. They have what we call a racetrack or a toilet seat, I've seen them called. They will have a connection that runs in the very back of that intake manifold that runs behind and over the high pressure oil pump back there. And yeah, the process is pretty much the same, but it's definitely a lot more annoying to get it out of there. But make sure you go and get you some new intake manifold gaskets from Ford. And you also going to want to replace well, I done lost it, but you'll have a donut gasket that goes right here. Do not forget about that. You're going to want to replace it as well. You can get it from Ford, but don't forget that before you put that back on, because you fire a truck up and you'll have a hell of a coolant leak. All right, so now at this point, let's go ahead and get our oil cooler pulled. You're gonna have a bunch of 10 millimeters that hold the entire housing down. At this point, you also want to make sure that all your oil is drained, coolant as well, but this is usually a pretty nasty area that you can't get to when you're cleaning because the intake manifold's real thick right here. So just go ahead, and you're going to be cleaning up in the actual crevice anyway, but just to make it a little less irritating on you, just go ahead and do you some cleaning. Don't go crazy blowing stuff because it'll go in there. So just real steady there. Just clean it up a little bit. There you go. Just like that. Like so. Okay. Now we can continue. Ahead, pull all your tins out. Don't drop any of them. Set them aside. And at this point, we are ready to pull our oil core. This is going to make a hell of a mess, so make sure you have a drain pan up underneath the oil pan. So now get you some rags and just pick that up and get you a rag to place under it, and then we're going to go to the bench. Go ahead at this point and pull your screen. This will come with your oil cooler kit. This one's had something pass through it, as you can see, screen's busted. So now at this point, you're going to want to clean your valley out again. And I've not found a good way to drain this. The only way that you can really get this oil cooler cavity to drain is by pulling the high pressure oil pump. Other than that, it doesn't really drain. So you're gonna have to go get you a vacuum pump, an oil extractor of some sorts, and vacuum this whole crevice out here, and then make sure it's nice and clean. Do not use these blue shop rags when you clean inside here or anything on the oil cooler, because they leave fibers and they will clog the oil cooler and the IPR screen again. All right, so now that we're over on the bench with our oil cooler assembly, you'll need a T45, a T30, and a 13 millimeter, and a pick's helpful, and a screwdriver for this section right here. But you can go ahead and pretty much just start getting rid of all your O-rings that you no longer need. These will all come with your kit. And start bumping out all your bolts. Can't really mess this up. The small holes obviously take the T30s, and the big ones take the T45s. So once you have all your bolts loose there, you can go ahead on this section right here. This will come up as both these pieces will come together, and you're just gonna have to pry on it a little bit. Don't pry on it too crazy, because it is just aluminum. We don't want to break this housing because it's very expensive. Just work it around, you'll get it. Just takes a little bit of time. And then she'll pop right up, just like that. And then make sure that these two pieces separate here. Like so, you got an O-ring in there. Toss it. And then your top piece will now come loose. Same thing, pry on it, don't go crazy. You can set it aside. So as you can see in here, you're going to have O-ring here, here. This one's pinched. This is probably where our leak was coming from. Oh yeah. You can see just how flat that O-ring is. And it's pinched right there and right there. So it's more than likely where our oil leak was coming from. Oh yeah, split. So yeah. All right, so now at this point, you're gonna have a 13mm nut right there and a 13mm nut right there. At this point, you're going to want to get a bucket, and we're going to flip this upside down and let it drain, because we have 2 more 13mm bolts underneath that cover. Alright, so once you have your cooler drained, you can go ahead and now flip this on up, like so. And you'll have 2 13mm bolts right there. So at this point, we're going to move over to the vise. And the way that I like to do this is, don't just go pounding on this, because if you miss and you hit this aluminum housing, you can crack this housing. And I'm telling you, it's like $500 just for this lower housing. So don't do that. Way I like to do it is, I've got an old 17mm socket that I'll take, and I'll just use it as a punch, and I'll just drive this down. So when we put it in the vise, you'll support it right here up underneath on the housing itself, and have enough room to where the cooler can drop out. So a vise works best for me, but what I've done is, if you're in a pinch, you can take 2 blocks of wood and just place it up under this and this right here, and then you can drive it down. But let's go ahead and I'll get this pressed out, and then we'll go to the parts washer. Okay, so now that you have your cooler pressed out and this is opened up, you're gonna have an O-ring right here, a small one in the middle, and there's a little plug, little hex plug right here that's also got one in it. When you do this, flip it around, it's this nice shiny one, and just press down. It'll pop right out, and you got an O-ring right there. Make sure you change that, because you'll have an O-ring left over. One, two, and three. Okay, so at this point, we are ready to go to the parts washer and get this housing and all your plates and everything all cleaned up. And make sure you do a good job on cleaning this. Don't want anything left over. Make sure you blow it out. I get done with the parts washer, I blow it out with brake clean, and then I go over to the air hose and just blow it out, make sure I got all the loose stuff. But once you have that done, we'll go ahead and assemble our cooler and get it back in the truck. Alright, now that you got your housings nice and cleaned up, sorry, this one still looks dingy, somebody spray painted it. We'll go ahead and assemble our new cooler. You'll have your new O-ring pack that comes with your cooler. Do not forget to put your screen back in the valley, because if this doesn't go back in there, any type of junk or anything that wants to pass by goes straight to your pump, which obviously is a problem. So you'll have your thick black O-rings. Some will be just a fuzz bigger. Big ones go on the bottom. and small ones go on the top, like so. So now you can set this aside. We can move on over to our bottom housing here. Back to our small plug here. Go ahead and get your O-ring pulled off of it. Don't get your old ones confused with your new ones. You'll have a smaller one on your small O-rings. You'll have a smaller one and a bigger one. Your bigger one goes in the crevice down here on the actual bottom of the plate, right there. And your smaller one will go on this plug. Like so. Don't get your old O-rings mixed up with your new ones. And now you're gonna want to go get you some type of lube. I like to use Hyper Lube from, I think I get it from Advanced. I use it on everything, injector O-rings and all. You can use grease if you want to. I just prefer not to. And you want to make sure that you lube all your O-rings up that press in. So we're going to lube this one up before we press it back into the housing. Be generous with it. Don't want to rip an O-ring. And then we're just going to drop her back in. Press it firmly. Just like so. Next you're going to have two thin, larger black O-rings. Those press in right here. And now at this point, you are ready to put your cooler back into this housing. So what I like to do is I'm going to be very generous on these O-rings. I mean, just lather them up. Don't be shy. Get you a nice good coverage on them. Like so. I also like to take leftover and just run it around inside this housing here so that it's not going in dry. And now just going to press this down on here and then just put your body weight on it. It'll pop in just like that. So now we can go ahead, put our nuts back on. Flip it over. Don't forget about your bolts down here. These do not have to be very tight. Remember that this housing is aluminum and you will strip it. I like to get all of them started. Don't completely tighten them up just yet. Just snug them all down. That way we know everything is started and you're not cross-threading. That's all you need right there. That's tight enough. If you wanna feel better and look up a torque spec, you be my guest. Now take your top housing here. Get your small D-looking O-ring. Get that nice and pressed in. And then your goofy looking one. Just take your time, work your way all the way around. You want to make sure that this gets pressed in there nice and good. We don't want it pinched. Like so. And now you're ready to place this back on. Like so. Now go ahead and start your bolts. Get your bolts nice and cleaned up. Same thing on this. I like to just put a little bit of lube on the inside of here so it's not going in dry. And then make sure you get enough lube on this O-ring right here. And then same thing, you're just gonna press it on down. Now press your top plate in. You have another O-ring. Don't forget to put that in there. So. Try and start all these bolts by hand. Don't send them home with the ratchet because it's aluminum. You got your next O-ring. That is your oil bowl O-ring. Now you can flip this over like so, and you're ready for your blue O-ring. Make sure you got it nice and pressed into all your crevices here. And that is it, people. You are ready to go back in the truck. So now if you like, you can go back through, and I like to just go grab me a ratchet and I'll just check all these bolts, just make sure that they're all nice and tight the way I want them. Like I said, don't go crazy with it. You do not want to strip the threads out of it because it's just an aluminum housing. All right, I want to give my final pointers here before I close out this video. So when you go back in with your turbo, what I was talking about is go ahead and put your downpipe clamp and rest it on the actual housing of the turbo when you go back in. That way you're not trying to fight it. And then if you have a gap, do not rely on that clamp to suck your up pipes in and make a seat on the actual turbo itself. You want those to have no gap when you put the turbo back in before you even put the clamp back on. So if you're fighting that, go back here and on your back bolt back here. Sorry, I'm trying to give you the best line of sight as I can give you. So on the actual foot back here on the turbo, there's a tang on the back of the actual turbo pedestal. You want to make sure that that foot is setting down in there and not resting cocked up, like not sitting on the actual tang itself. Rock it down in there, and before you tighten either of your bolts, go ahead and get a good seat on your up pipes. Now this is only going to apply if you're not putting new up pipes in it. If you're putting new up pipes in it, leave your bolts down there on the manifold loose, and then get this connection up here tight, and then go down and tighten up your manifold bolts. But if you're leaving up pipes alone, that is the best trick that I have found as far as putting it back together and getting a good seat on your up pipes. Because a lot of times you'll sit here and you'll fight it, and you won't have a good seat, and you'll have to sit there and fight your up pipes. But in reality, the actual hot side housing is resting on that tang on the turbo pedestal. So just rock it in there, get it nice and seated down. Like I said, make sure you got a good amount of lube on your actual drain when you go down with it so you don't rip an O-ring. And then also on your upgraded EGR cooler, if you need O-rings for it, on the actual coolant side of it, a turbo, the drain gasket works perfect on it. Lube it up real good, press it in there, and make sure you got a good clamp to go on the actual oil cooler. Now, what I like to do is over the next course of a week of driving or so, I'll go back in after a couple heat cycles, and I want to tighten up both those clamps, because what will happen is those clamps, you know, through a couple heat cycles will loosen up, and you'll develop a coolant leak in the valley that runs down and drips by the starter only when it's cold, and then when you start the truck up and warm it up, it'll seal. So after a couple heat cycles, if you can do it while it's warm, that's the way I do it. Don't go too crazy with them, because you will strip the clamps out, but you just want them to be tight. And just go back in after a couple heat cycles, tighten them up, and you should be good to go. But I think that's all I've really got for you. I think I'm going to wrap it up now, and just make sure you go back and change all your gaskets. Make sure you have all your O-rings to go back on all your lines. They should still be in your fuel bowl, but make sure you didn't lose any of them before you go back in, because you'll have a leak. Bend your tang back down here, put your bolt back in, and that's about it. Don't forget to replace any pigtails that you need to. Don't forget your oil filter standpipe O-ring that does not come with your oil cooler kit. And that's really about it, people. I think I'm going to close it up now. Thanks for watching, and I hope this was helpful for you. All right, so that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully everything was super helpful for you, and if you can just follow the steps, you should be good to go. Don't forget your screen in the valley, like I said, and don't forget to replace all your gaskets, your intake manifold gaskets, the donut gasket for your coolant on the front cover. Don't forget it. But everything from this point forward is pretty much just reverse of how we took it apart. So just start going backwards from this point if you need, you know, pointers on how to put it back together. On your turbo, don't fight it too hard. Make sure your downpipe, not your downpipe, I'm sorry, your up pipe clamp is actually on the turbo before you go back in with it. Be generous on the lube on your drain. That way when the turbo sits down, it doesn't rip an O-ring. And that's pretty much it. I'm gonna wrap it up there, and like I said, hope it was helpful. But sorry, this is going to be a little bit of a longer video. I just wanted to give you as many good pointers as I've learned over the years on doing that job. Clean all your parts up, be clean, and just replace whatever you need to as you go back together with it. Broken pigtails, injector harness if it's rubbed. Clean your intake manifold up, make sure it looks good, make sure. And another thing I like to do is before you set your intake manifold back on, take your pin magnet and stick it down in all the holes on the cylinder head and just let it go all the way down, and just let it catch any type of garbage that fell down in there, just in case you missed anything. It's better to be safe than sorry. So make sure there's no bolts down in the holes, and you're pretty much good to go. Another thing is, when you replace your oil cooler on a 6-liter, go ahead and put your 15 quarts in, start the truck, let it cycle, and it will hold usually roughly 2.5 quarts extra on top of your just normal 15 quarts. So check your oil. I usually just put 2 quarts in once I get done with it and get the truck running, and go drive the truck, let it bleed all the air out, and check your oil and keep an eye on it over the next week or so as you drive your truck. But it will hold another 2 quarts over your factory 15 quarts. Use Motorcraft filters when you go back together with it. And at this point, if you would like to put a coolant filter on, you can. I don't use them. I don't think that they work really good unless you're going to buy an IPR one, that the remote one that has the manifold that actually mounts on the cooler itself. I think those filter like 100% of the coolant before it goes into the oil cooler. They're a little bit more expensive. There's a reason because of that. If you want to buy one at this point, it'd be a good idea. But that's about it. And once again, thank you to everybody who is subscribing, watching the channel, and supporting us. Y'all are awesome. And I'll try and upload another video before the end of the week here, just us goofing off. But that's it. Thanks, guys. Bye.